Now, there are those who will try to tell you the death of U.S. manufacturing is a myth, or that it's been greatly exaggerated. After all, we're still the #1 manufacturer in the world. And the UN's comprehensive database will show you that in 2009, U.S. manufacturing output was $2.15 trillion, compared to China's $1.48 trillion. But whereas during World War II, at the peak, manufacturing made up 28% of the U.S. economy, that number is now down to just 12%. So the jobs are still vanishing, even if productivity is moving up. And the things that we like to produce, like fighter jets, are not what your average consumer buys at the store. So how do we make manufacturing the powerhouse that it used to be in America? And how do we make things that all Americans, and not just the Pentagon, want to buy? Joining me from our studio in New York to discuss it is Gregory White of the Business Insider. Greg, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Now, for starters, I think that if you ask a lot of Americans, they're just going to say nothing's made in America anymore, because the things that the average consumer buys at Walgreens, at Target, the toys, the clothing, they normally do say made in China on them. But, the things that we still do produce here, like I said, like fighter jets or airplanes, is that really, is that sustainable for us to continue to not make things that are used by the average American, but the only big companies or that the Pentagon wants to buy, or even perhaps other countries that need to beef up their military?
Well, there are a lot of things we do make here that actually the American consumer does buy. One of those is cars, and that was the biggest downturn this past month, was about certain components that get put into cars not being sent from Japan due to the impact of the tsunami. So we do still make things here, but is it possible to have the level of employment in the manufacturing sector we had before many of these jobs and things like toys and clothes were shipped overseas? No, that's never going to come back.
You think there's no way that manufacturing is ever going to come back to the U.S.? I mean, what does that mean for the future of our economy?
Well, there are ways to find more people jobs in high-tech manufacturing, the sort of things that we produce here that sell great around the world. And I mean, that's fighter jets, but it's also some computers, it's also some solar technology, it's this high-tech stuff. And a country like Germany is showing the way for that. They're focusing on how they can educate their youth through both university and prior, and prepare them for jobs in high-tech manufacturing instead of preparing them for jobs in low-tech manufacturing that no longer exists. So we really need to think about how we can change our education system to give opportunities to young students now to get into the high-tech manufacturing sector.
And do you think that that's something that's a realistic goal? I mean, if you look at, recent reports that'll come out, you'll see also that China is moving ahead when it comes to education. You'll see that, an education, a college education in particular, is becoming increasingly expensive in America. Not everybody can afford that. And we're seeing, one of the largest divides in wealth we've ever seen. We're seeing the middle class start to fade away. So how realistic is it to actually have an entire group of young people, or, perhaps even older people, that can go into high-tech manufacturing?
Well, it's realistic if that's where the government wants to put its money. I know the government's priorities for spending right now are a little bit out of whack in terms of how much we spend on defense and military expenditures abroad, as well as other expenditures for the U.S. government. If they were to refocus that on training young people for high-tech engineering positions and other jobs in manufacturing that are of high-tech, either through postgraduate schools or through state colleges that already exist, giving them grants and support, we could get there. But that's not the government's priority right now, even though they talk about it like it is.
And so then what do you do with the older workers, perhaps the ones that used to work at all the car plants? Where do they go?
This is the problem. I mean, these older workers, they need to be retrained, but the government isn't willing to spend money to do that. They can't get their heads together on how to build programs for these people. So what's happening is they're just dropping out of the workforce, and you can see that with the broader unemployment rate. It's now much higher than the regular unemployment rate, and that's because these people are simply choosing, they can't find jobs. They're just choosing not to work anymore.
Now, let's say that things do continue on the path, like we said, even though the government pretends like they want to look at more innovation and focus on education, they're going in the opposite direction. How soon until China does overtake the U.S. as the #1 manufacturer in the world?
I don't know. I can't put a date on that, but certainly the U.S. country has something to be afraid of, and they can look right across to Britain to see it. That's a country that all they really do, it seems, is financial services and some tech. and there's long-term institutionalized unemployment there of cities that have been involved in manufacturing for decades prior. That is the fate of the U.S. if we don't refocus our energies now, and certainly China will best us in the next 20 years if we don't get control of that.
But let's say that the government does refocus its interests. Let's say they do start educating more Americans. Let's say they even start re-educating older Americans. Are businesses going to hire them? Come on, labor is a lot cheaper in China.
That's definitely true. Labor's a lot cheaper in China right now, but that's changing. Wages are going up in China, and they're going to have to make adjustments that's going to see prices rise there too. Some manufacturers are already moving their low-cost goods to other places like Bangladesh and Vietnam and China. But what's important for the U.S. government to do is not just re-educate people, but also provide the opportunities for businesses to start here or to move high-tech manufacturing back home. This needs to be a real core to our policy strategy for American growth in the next 5 to 10 years. But no one seems to have that sort of long-term vision at the helm right now, whether that's in Congress or in the White House.
And I think you could say a lot of that, too, is just within the people. We like our deals, and we like our get-them-quick deals. You want to go into any store you can and get that iPhone for sale. So we'll see. Greg, thanks so much for joining us tonight.